Although this is the team meeting for UX and product to plan for 16.2. And I wanted to start off by saying or reiterating what I mentioned in the issue. I don't know if y'all saw that yet. I think I posted it mid-Friday last week. I think we should go back to trying to work the way that we worked before the reorg, where we look at things holistically as a team, and then we try to see what is the top priority per group. And then we try to find designers that might be able to take that on. Instead of being so, this group is asleep and sorry, you don't get help, you get to figure it out. So try to revert back to figuring out how we can help everyone. That said, it's going to be difficult.
The 2 designers we have currently.
Yes,
yes,
exactly. So we'll have to be very diligent at how we prioritize. So before it wasn't so bad. There are 2 or 3 mechanisms on the issue where we can sort of prioritize. We have the first column where it's literally a prioritization number, but then you have nice to have or need to have. And then you have another column of milestone, like when does it need to be done by? So we take each of those into account to try and assess which groups is a truly higher priority than the one that was previously being discussed. Does that make sense? Okay. That said, Sam, dude, come on. Sorry, not you.
Sorry,
Sam.
what's that?
It was my dog. His name is Sam too.
Oh.
He was harassing me. I'm gonna share the issue.
But yeah, I think that's a great idea. It would be really nice if we could go back to prioritizing the way we were before, from my perspective.
Yeah, we do have to be careful because I didn't tell anyone we were doing this. I just decided to do it. So I'm not sure how wide we want to share the video. Ask for forgiveness, right?
That's fine with me.
All right. So Mike is still out. Family day.
Well, and just a note on that. I mean, I think it's worth noting that, if there's a team that doesn't have UX support, they're gonna go forward with, potential UX changes. And if they're not allowed to ping any designers during planning or pre-implementation, then it's just going to come down to a UX review in the MR, and then whatever UX designer, excuse me, product designer gets that review is going to look at things and maybe say, well, why is this the way that it is? And ask the questions at that point. And, engineers at that point are just like, can we just ship this, with what we have, and then do follow-up iterations? But then that designer is kind of on the hook for creating those follow-up implementation issues once they've recognized that UX debt. So it just makes sense to do it earlier in the process than at the MR stage. And then it falls on the, whatever UX person the reviewer roulette has chosen.
Yeah, and technically this is part of that is acceptable for this move, right? So UX department has agreed that we understand there's going to be UX debt, not necessarily the burden that the MR reviewer is being put on that you were also mentioning, but the concept that there will be UX debt, and we'll just have to figure that out later when we get more resources or whatever the case may be. But from a secure and govern perspective, all of our groups overlap with each other so much that it's an even bigger problem. If we let one group that doesn't have a DRI designer go off, then they're potentially going to cause problems for other groups that it overlaps with. And I just don't think we can afford that to happen. So that's why it seems to make sense to at least see if we can figure out how to make this work with 2 designers. So I'll deal with the aftermath if leadership gets mad at me. All right.
As
Let's dive
someone
in,
without,
'cause-
I was just gonna
Go
say,
ahead.
I really support the proposal and appreciate it. As someone who doesn't have UX support right now, I know we probably don't need a ton of it, but I totally agree with everything you're both saying about hopefully our team not creating more UX debt for everyone else. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. You're welcome.
the
Because I
hard
was
part-
so late. Yeah.
I think the hard part for me anyways is knowing like where the priorities fall across the stages and like how do we choose which is the most.
Yeah. I think that's where these meetings and the issue is going to be even more important than it has been, especially considering how few designers we have now and how many groups we have. So we're really going to have to be tough on ourselves, right? We're going to have to actually pay attention to this process. Before, it's been really lackadaisical because we just talk to each other and say, yeah, we need this and this. Cool, go do it. Now we're really going to have to think about it and say, hey, Sarah needs something, like for real. She really needs it. So how do we get that done while Derek also needs something with two designers? You know, we're going to have to be pretty diligent in how we triage and prioritize. So we'll see how that goes. And with that said, let us start by looking at compliance. Does compliance have any needs?
I mean, this is I guess it's a question mark for me because I know Camellia has been working on quite a few things, and we have jobs to be done, that research that Michael Oliver is going to kick off once he's back. I can't remember if he's back this week or not, but
He's not.
so, but he should be back in 16.2. So I don't know. I mean, compared to what the other teams have, I don't know if that would be top priority because we can live for another month or two without research jobs to be done. And the stuff that Camellia is working on right now is important from a compliance perspective, but not 100% like we absolutely need to have it in this milestone.
Okay.
So, and I would like to hear what the other teams need personally before I say that we definitely need Camellia to work on something. Unless Camellia, there's something that you feel like you're working on right now that we absolutely need.
So what I'm working on now, I think is like it's actually overlapping with what I'm talking in the issues with Grant on the policy side. It's more about like how to help user use compliant framework to manage like policies and like the adherence checks and also move the location. So I think for both groups, like from the roadmap file I see, like is going to support this combination of the pipeline, like the framework pipeline that in the framework to be combined with policy. So that's I feel like that's a preparation work. So if there's anything, there is nothing else besides what I see in the roadmap. I think for both group, what I'm working on now, just to make the management of the compliance framework will be like important for both of the future works.
That is extremely important for the longer term roadmap and something that we need to get right. So that's definitely worth the time spent on it. So I mean, yeah, that would be probably my top priority for compliance, just because if we don't get that right, it's going to cause major issues for a lot of customers. So if there's nothing else that's like pressing in terms of we need it right away, then yeah, that would be my top priority.
Okay, that's when it'll be very helpful for future calls to make sure that we have these tables filled in, because that's how we'll know these three levels: the priority, the need or nice to have, and then the ready for build by.
And
because then we can look at each
question-
group's issue and compare it to the other group's issues.
Yeah, one question about that. in the past for dynamic analysis, Michael filled it out. Do you expect designers or product managers to fill this out?
I think that it should be a product designer working with their product manager to make sure that they're on the same page. But Michael's not here, so Connor would have to fill it out, for instance. If he has a new need for, and he knows he doesn't have a designer, he'll need to fill that out. So any group that doesn't have a designer, the product manager is going to have to fill it out. Kind of figure that one out as I was talking out loud and realizing that not every group has a designer. So that's, yeah. Start with designer, and then if they don't have one, go with the product manager.
Good.
All right. So let's keep going, and then we'll try and have that conversation. We've got a little understanding of where compliance stands for their needs.
Yeah, and another point with compliance is we haven't done a UX roadmap session yet, so we won't have themes or anything like that until after the jobs to be done research is done. So
okay,
I guess I'll throw everything under non-theme related needs.
Yeah, that's fine. Composition analysis, Sarah.
Yeah, I think the main. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, why did you redact everything?
Oh, because I think it's been addressed by your comment that we can.
Oh, okay.
These were longer term things that we have coming up, but the one that we have that's sort of top of mind is continuous vulnerability scanning, and Becca was helping with that a little bit last week already, because it's one of those things where we're changing the backend, but it impacts the vulnerability report. So okay. I can come in here and add the design issue if that's the right way to handle it, or
yeah, if you could put it in the non-themed section.
Okay.
And that'll, off the top of your head, what do you think in terms of prioritization need and ready for build by?
Is ready for build by, that's a milestone?
Yeah, like they need to build it in 16.3. That means we really need to do it in 16.2.
Okay. Yeah, 16.2 would be ready for build by.
Hang on, I gotta fix Google.
I can fix for formatting.
I'm sorry, what milestone did you say?
16.2.
You
would be great.
You need it designed so it can be built, or are you expecting to have it built in 16.2?
Let me go double check and make sure I have it aligned, because the dates have shifted a little bit. Okay. So I'll double check.
Because that's that ramps up the priority, right? Because we're planning for 16.2, which means somehow or another we need to design it and build it in the same milestone.
Yeah, it was a couple of changes to the vulnerability report kind of, and I think, I mean, I don't know the full process, but I think Becca had already done a lot of it as well.
Okay. All right, cool. So we will check that out once you're able to get that information. Dynamic analysis. Does anyone know?
Yeah, nothing. We don't even have front-end developers, so.
So this one truly is asleep.
Yeah.
Okay. Whoa, that is a long label. Is that a real label?
Yeah, I noticed that.
Heck?
I think I just like leveraged what was in the comment, like commented out. So I think the label in this particular project is that long. I don't know. So maybe I'll replace it and just put solution validation in text.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are two related themes that I'm kind of working through, and I feel like more of what the needs are here is just like design support. So we completed a solution validation for compliance enforcement of security policies and had like one kind of design iteration come out of that. So small effort to tweak that. And I've already been talking to you, Camellia, about it as far as like the info tooltips for the different project override settings. But then I think we'll be ready for dev with everything we have there. The other one is unifying compliance pipelines and security policies, which Camellia also mentioned earlier, kind of aligns a lot with the work y'all are doing on compliance. We've done a solution validation before through user testing and an unmoderated test, but I would like to put it in front of some existing and active customers who've been using compliance pipelines or security policies already, and just make sure that we're vetting it with those users. So a lot of it, I think I'm handling on my end, just making some tweaks to the prototype, and then going to refresh that a little bit and get some new candidates through Derek on the compliance side and through some of the contacts I've been working with, some of the customers we've been working with on the security policy side. So I don't think there's a whole lot needed, but I've been asking a lot of questions your way, Camellia, as I'm just working through each of the screens and then like making sure it makes sense to me, so that I can run this through another study. I know we're talking about 16.2 here, so a lot of this is already like happening right now. I think that my expectation for 16.2 is we might need a little bit of support if there's some small tweaks or changes to the existing designs, but I don't anticipate anything large scale. I just don't know what those things might be yet until we do the solution validation again.
Okay, so with that, we could probably, Camellia, play the same thing that we were trying for 16.1, where you just make sure there's an ample amount of flex capacity set aside, expecting
I
that
think
Grant will need some.
with the like 10 flex kind of capacity is definitely fine. It will be covered.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, and those are just the issues related to the themes above.
When you put S, what do you mean?
So I was just throwing things in there this morning, and it said wait, and so I put small. we can
Okay.
modify that to something more specific.
Yeah.
Oh, I can add it
will.
later. I didn't see this pin this morning. I saw the pin, but I didn't see a comment, so I thought like it was missed. And it's actually in the description, so I missed this one.
Oh no, and you're good because we just got that comment Friday, and so I wasn't sure if we need to put anything or just consider us sleeping. So so I just decided to add it all this morning.
Yeah, I kind of threw this new way of working on everyone at the last minute. Put a link in the agenda on how we think about weights from a UX perspective. I think it's fairly typical from an agile weighting concept. Let me check that out when you get a minute. Static analysis. No one's here. Does anyone know? Oh my God, I can't type. Two minutes. Go, Becca.
Yeah, all the things done. So I'll start with two. Definitely a continuation of the filter grouping, saved views, moderated solution validation / has also become a little bit of an AI discussion with security engineers because I want to get their thoughts. So that's a must. And then Alana and I are meeting tomorrow So Alana, I'm hoping you can chime in here. I don't know if there's going to be any explain this vuln design needs for GA, but just how quickly we've kept the conversation and the designs and everything going between experiment and beta. I'm guessing there's going to be GA work in the next milestone.
I'm not sure necessarily about GA work and how much front end changes we're going to do because it's mostly about hardening. But I imagine that there's going to be some work around resolve this vulnerability, because I think we're going to want to have something experimental in there, and it might just be leveraging opening, like automate, or like when you open a MR today to resolve a vulnerability, it might be like following that design pattern, but I think it's worth carving out some time so that way we can look into it. And I know there's some design components within that specific feature that need updating, like the button's still green. So I think that's probably going to be more of the focus for 16.2.
Okay, and I don't think we have a design issue open yet for resolve.
We don't. I have it on my list of things to do today.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
Yep. So I'll go.
I will replace this GA explain this phone with a new design for resolve this phone, which I guess would that be considered an experiment?
I think it would be considered an experiment, but then we maybe also want to also have one for beta. But there may not be much front end stuff for beta for resolve this phone. I think we'll have to figure it out. The other thing is with the UX requirements that are required for moving something from experiment to beta, there will be a solution validation. I think if I'm remembering correctly, it's just like spend a day on a solution validation internally. It's not like a full-fledged solution validation. So I will also have issues ready for you tomorrow for those. So hopefully those are a lighter weight than some of the other stuff, but yeah.
Okay.
The one thing.
Just gonna say, because we're over time,
Yeah.
please make sure to put those in correct priority orders and fill in the other three, because when Sarah gets back with the information on her needs, I think the only person that might be available to help would be Becca. Plus, I think it overlaps with Becca anyway, so it would make sense.
Okay.
So we'll have to have that conversation. We'll do it in this issue to discuss ultimately what the resolution is. And if we need to, we can have another call.
Yeah, Becca and I will meet tomorrow and have that finalized by end of day tomorrow. So then we can make those choices for 16.2.
Cool. Once you've updated it, Sarah, you as well, just ping everyone in a comment in this issue so we can all take a look at it and start to discuss how we plan on dealing with it for 16.2.
And then I'm hoping, counting on wrapping up the post MVC dependency list issue this week, as well as the CVS designs that I met with Sarah about last week. It seems like it's going to be a lot of copy changes, so I could hand most of that off to Russell. And then want to wrap up explain this phone beta. So those three things are really important to conclude this week, so nothing is carried over.
But I think you still have 2 more weeks for 16.1, right? It's only the 5th.
Oh,
yeah, 2 weeks.
Why
Yeah, the 16th is next Friday. So yeah, you got 2 weeks.
Oh, great.
You have some more time.
Great, I will take it.
All right. Last thoughts.
Well, I was hoping there was time to discuss this CVS issue. I mean, the fact that most of us haven't dropped 3 minutes ago, I'm guessing nobody has a meeting right now. Is it okay to talk about that as a group, or would you rather end? Oh, you have a thing.
No,
Justin.
Yeah, but it's just other UX managers, so I can live without me. I make more noise than is necessary. Go ahead. What are we talking about?
Okay. And oh yes, I can just take over. Okay. So Sarah and I met last week to discuss the changes. And again, sorry, Alana, I haven't had time to meet with you about this. So it's possible that we just talk about this, but open to feedback, because I'm not exactly sure what has to change here regarding the pipeline, the last pipeline widget here. So with continuous vulnerability scanning being introduced, the last updated pipeline isn't really going to be accurate anymore, because a pipeline may have run 3 months ago, but then an advisory database updated after that pipeline ran and then introduced new vulnerabilities. So I'm wondering, like, if we need this widget at all, or how we might be able to adapt it to continuous vulnerability scanning being introduced. I wasn't sure if this should be like stage-wide discussion.
What if we did something like the last pipeline was updated 10 minutes ago, or 2 weeks ago, and we found additional things, and so continuous vulnerability scanning was run, like we just elaborate on it for now.
Yeah, Sarah and I thought that wasn't one option. Yeah, we could do something like that. Yep.
I mean, even with continuous vulnerability scanning, one thing to keep in mind is it is still dependent on the last pipeline run. So there are two parts to it. One is the advisories, and then the other part is what dependencies you have. So it's pulling the list of dependencies from the last pipeline, and then it's continuously scanning those dependencies for new advisories. But there still is a tieback, even with continuous vulnerability scanning. We're still pulling that list of dependencies from the last pipeline run. So I feel like the last pipeline run is still relevant, even in context of continuous vulnerability scanning. It's just that, that's where we're pulling the list of dependencies instead of the vulnerabilities from, but there still is a correlation there. I don't know how to explain all of that here in the UI. I don't know if that even needs to be explained necessarily, but
it sounds like elaboration makes sense, but then you can explain the context in docs.
Yeah. It may just be, this is what happened. If you want to know what's going on behind the scenes there, here's docs to read all the things. Because my understanding was that the last pipeline could be 3 months ago, but then you may have vulnerabilities introduced from like yesterday.
So when you say vulnerabilities introduced, there are two ways that vulnerabilities can be introduced. The first way is that you add a new dependency that has vulnerabilities. But the second way is that you have a dependency that already exists on the default branch, and someone else has reported a new advisory, found a new vulnerability in that package you already had. And so continuous vulnerability scanning is rescanning for new advisories. If there's not a pipeline run, presumably you haven't added any new dependencies in. So you shouldn't have any new vulnerabilities through the first way, unless somehow you made a commit or pushed into the default branch without running a pipeline. Would sort of be like a weird edge case, but I think most people try to avoid that happening. So what we're doing is we're continuously scanning the dependencies that were found as of the last pipeline run, technically. But then if there's a new advisory reported for those dependencies, that would show up then in the list. There's kind of that distinction there.
So you think it would work to just keep this as is, but like explain a little bit more?
I think we almost could just keep this as is and maybe just add a tooltip or a note that says, you know, container and dependency scanning vulnerabilities are updated live as new advisories are reported. I don't know, maybe something like that.
Probably put an info. You put an
Yeah,
info,
like an info
icon.
tooltip. I
Okay.
also wonder as I'm looking at this, if maybe that 2-line description update or description at the top, maybe that could go in a tooltip too. Anyway, just a thought. We're getting a lot of like notes here at the top of the page. It's kind of like, oh, here's a note. Oh, here's a note. But I don't know. Maybe we leave it as is. Maybe that description is important for context.
Yeah, I think I'd like to leave the description,
I
which is pretty standard across. Go ahead.
Yeah, or combine those two, since like one of them become less important as before. Maybe just combine these two in a way.
I think like the last updated section, like if we leave it as is, I do feel like renaming it might be helpful, because last updated to me suggests like the entire page was last updated, looking at this screenshot 10 minutes ago, but maybe the pipeline was last updated 10 minutes ago. But again, if a new, I mean, 10 minutes is not likely to be the time frame, but if it's at 6 months and then the new advisory did lead to a new vulnerability here, I feel like saying last updated 6 months ago, that also sort of suggests that we're not doing continuous vulnerability scanning, like in a way. Like if it's continuous, I don't expect the last update to have been 6 months ago.
Well, it could
That
say
makes sense.
continuously updated and last pipeline.
Yeah, I like the last pipeline wording. I don't know what other people think.
Yeah, last pipeline is much more accurate because yeah, even saying like continuously updated isn't entirely accurate either, because we're not continuously updating the other types of vulnerabilities. Like if SAST releases a new set of rules, like a new rule set, we're not automatically applying that as of right now. And so some of the other ways that new vulnerabilities could show up, we're not doing that yet, but it is based off of the last pipeline run. So I agree with that change for sure.
It's just the last pipeline. It may not be the last pipeline in the project, right? Because this is the last pipeline that introduced any security vulnerabilities, but there could have been like many pipelines run. So I don't know if we need to clarify that here.
You're saying there could be a more recent pipeline run and we're not using that one?
There could have been pipeline runs on the project where like security jobs didn't run. So it's not like the last pipeline on the project. It's like the last pipeline where security stuff was involved. Because I don't, well, and even if security jobs ran and didn't find any vulnerabilities, would that even show up here?
I thought we took, I guess I don't know for sure, but I thought we took the last pipeline, and if you don't run security jobs, or if no vulnerabilities are found either way, then you would end up with a blank list. I thought it always went off of the last pipeline,
Oh, okay. I'll have to look into that.
but that might be something to double check on.
You think that's the last pipeline run on the project, regardless of whether or not security jobs were included in it? Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And if security jobs are not included, then you would get a blank list. You would get an empty state.
I'm not sure what you mean by that, empty state.
You would get no vulnerabilities showing up. Like you wouldn't have any
So-
vulnerabilities in your list.
What? No, there would still be older vulnerabilities from older pipelines below here in the vuln report.
Again, I'm not sure, but I don't think we're going back and looking at older pipelines. I thought we were just looking at the latest pipeline, the latest successful pipeline.
But
Anyway, we
what
don't
if
have
it's
to
like a
solve that all right
past?
now, but
Okay.
maybe we can test that and verify.
I really hope that's not true. That would be very bad. Right?
Be-
If no security jobs were run, it doesn't mean that the existing vulnerabilities identified in previous pipelines don't exist anymore.
I think that's what we assume right now, yeah. So it would mark everything as resolved in that case that or no longer detected. So it wouldn't actually be a blank list. All of your vulnerabilities would still be there. It would just, you would see that little icon next to every single one saying that it was no longer detected. Because it thinks that all of your vulnerabilities have gone away.
Okay, I really hope that's not true.
I think that actually would be expected behavior.
But if there's no security jobs ran, how can we say that they're resolved?
So we don't detect right now whether or not the security jobs run or not. We just look at the results. We just look at what job artifacts are produced. So if you run the pipeline and you don't produce any security job artifacts, then we assume that everything is cleared out. Again, I'm not like 100% sure. I'm probably like 95% sure. So we could do a quick test to verify, but I think that's how it works today.
I'm pretty sure it is. And it's something that's bothered me because really it should be dependent on when the last job of that type was run. And if it wasn't run again, we shouldn't show that they weren't found, right? It should only show that they weren't found if that job was run again and we didn't find it in the new report.
Right.
But
yeah, all of
I
the
think that's
same
the-
logics that we've been working on gradually applying to the merge request widget, we probably need to carry that over to the vulnerability report as well. And exactly, like we should go back until we find a DAST, job artifact. And if we don't find a DAST job artifact, okay, then it was never run. But if we don't find one in the latest pipeline, but we find one 3 pipelines ago, then that's the one that we should be pulling in and using. I'm almost positive we're not doing that today. We're just looking purely at the latest pipeline that was successfully completed.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that you're completely right on that.
Okay. More for Alana and I to discuss tomorrow in our sync.
Aside from that, where you need to verify and maybe submit an issue if there isn't one, do you have enough to progress your direction?
To regress the direction?
Progress. Move forward.
Progress. Yes. For now. I mean, I have just follow-up to do's.
Then with that, thank you all. I apologize for being late, and I look forward to discussing the plan and the issue, and we'll figure it out from there.
Have a good week.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thanks,
y'all.
y'all. You too.
Thanks.